question is how to get a big, thick trunk in your bonsai. Of course, a big trunk is not the only thing in the concept of bonsai. A good Nebari, eventually a nice movement in the trunk, but especially the taper in the trunk is very important. To give you an idea about the techniques we can use concerning a big trunk, I've got a nice example for you, because the tree we were talking about before has too many leaves and it's not a clear image. Let me get one thing straight. A thick trunk can only be grown by length. So when you keep your tree short and you prune it often, you won't get a big trunk. If you want inches or cms in the trunk, you need meters on the foliage and on the branches. This is a one-on-one relation. 1 meter with foliage or 1 meter on the branch will give you about, it depends on the variety of course, 1 cm of thickness in the trunk. So if you want to grow a tree 40 cm high, 5 cm broad, you need about 5 meters of length to get this trunk together. Of course you can separate it in more or less branches you have on the tree. If you want a one-on-one trunk thickness with no taper, of course you can get the primary trunk upright till 3, 4, 5 meters, cut it back, and then you have only the first part of the trunk. So most of the time you combine two techniques. You get a big sacrifice branch or sacrifice trunk, how you call it, will give the length on the entire trunk. Besides, you use the side branches to get the thickness on the part in the trunk which is connected to the branch. This is an old Crataegus, a Yamadori, and the trunk was very nice up to this part. I bought this tree about 8 years ago. So everything from this part on is grown in my garden. So this part is about 4 cm. Did have some very long branches on several places from 2.5 to 3 meters. Cutting it back, letting a side branch take over the trunk line has been done once, twice, 3 times now. And as you can see, I think it's getting somewhere. The taper is quite nice, and there only have to be done something in this part of the apex. I think next spring, because this part is about 8 cm, so this part has to be shorter. I think in future these two sprouts will make the new apex of this tree, and then this part can be cut off. Everything above this part hasn't grown in vain. It has made this part of the trunk thick enough to match the original Yamadori trunk. In bonsai there are two techniques, whether you reduce a tree or you let a tree grow. Normally those two techniques are combined together to get the image and the branches you want. In this example you can see that, in my opinion, the primary branch is much thinner than the secondary branch. If you look at this problem from the objective of cutting, you will cut this branch and start with this branch as the primary branch. For me, I think this place and this branch is very important for the big trunk and the difference in taper between the lower part and the secondary part of the trunk. So I think it's important to have a big branch here. To overgrow the thickness of this one, I need about 4 cm, which means I need about 4 meters on this branch to grow in length, to become as thick as this branch. So next years I will keep all the other branches short, so all the energy and all the sap flow will concentrate on this branch. I will let it grow not 4 meters in once, but maybe with 4 or 5 side branches. Every side branch will become 1 meter, and then I will gain enough thickness in the branch to make it the primary branch and to fit in the idea of a big trunk and a lower primary branch on this place. This is another example. Besides the Crataegus, which was a big tree, a Yamadori, came from the field, and has to be adapted into a bonsai concept I have in mind for the tree. This is a seedling, grown from seed by a good friend of mine. As you can see, the trunk was grown in once, up to here. So the thickness of the trunk was equally divided over the entire 20 cm of it. Now it's time to get the taper in it. And in this case, with this technique, the part below the branch is getting the thickness from the length of the branch. So I use 4 branches to get the lower part of the trunk divided into a good tapering. And this is about millimeters. So this is about centimeters. When you talk about centimeters in the trunk, you need to talk about meters in the branches. If you need meters on a tree, you also need meters in the root system. So please keep in mind that the amount of soil is also in balance with the amount of growth you want. The root ball and the amount of foliage are more or less the same. I need about 1 or 2 years more to get this trunk into a nice taper. 1 year more, and then I will cut these back and start the refinement of the branches. Maybe 2 to 3 years from now, I need to get a little bit length in the branches around this part of the trunk, so the taper is getting on and on till this part, and then the apex will be refined. If you want to grow the thickness of the trunk as fast as possible, use a big pot, or maybe even a place in the field or in your garden. The more roots that can be developed, the quicker the branches will grow and the quicker the thickness of the trunk will evaluate. A few questions were about what is called inverse taper. The lower part of the trunk, in this case a Crataegus, is thinner than the part of the trunk above. There are a few techniques that can be applied to resolve this problem. First is try to get new sprouts on the thinner part of the trunk. When these sprouts start to grow, the trunk will thicken on this area of the tree, and when you keep this part of the tree short, and all the growth and the length of the growth will be in the underlying part, the trunk will thicken quite fast, and this problem can be reversed in 1 or 2 years. If there's no possibility to get new sprouts on the trunk, you can use a technique to activate the cambium layer of the tree to make tissue, to make wood. It's called callus. Callus is the tissue of the cambium that will overgrow wounds in the tree or when you cut a branch. One of your ideas is that you damage the cambium layer. The cambium layer will react by making callus, and in this callus there is also some wood cells or wooden cells, and it will thicken the trunk. You can use a nail or a point from your scissor. The idea is that you make small, they're not cuttings, it's just itching the cambium layer by hitting it with a sharp idea. I think this outline is perfect, so I will only use this technique on the inside of the movement of the trunk. Normally I put my scissor or something else sharp every 5 millimeters or something like that. And I will do this every month, and especially during the growing season. It will help the tree to improve its trunk line and its taper. So, in conclusion, if you want a bigger trunk, there are 3 ideas. If you want the entire trunk to get thicker, use the apex to grow in length, and it will thicken on the entire trunk. If you want a certain part of the trunk to thicken, use a branch just above that point, use the same technique by growing length, and the trunk will thicken on that particular area. If you have a certain point on the trunk and there is some inverse taper, use the damaging or the injuring technique, and the callus will set a little thickness in that part, that particular point of the trunk.